In 2017, FBI agents with guns drawn and a flashbang grenade burst into the Atlanta home of Trina Martin, her then 7-year-old son Gabe, and her partner Toy. Turns out they had the wrong address. In April, Trina's years-long fight for accountability is heading to the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm Kim Norberg of the nonprofit civil liberties law firm, the Institute for Justice, joined by co-host Keith Neely. We're talking to IJ client Trina Martin and IJ senior attorney Patrick Jaicomo about wrong house raids, what it's like to have the Supreme Court hear your case, and what victory will mean for Trina and all Americans. This is Beyond the Brief. So Trina, walk us through the morning in 2017 that started all of this.
We were all asleep, and I was awakened by with a monstrous noise. It was really loud, and I thought someone was breaking into our house. So I woke Toy up, and I said, "I think someone's breaking in our house." And by then, we hear all the boom and the bang from the grenade bombs, and just a lot of light. So as a mother, my motherly instincts, I automatically just woke up. Just popped up and was heading to our door so that I can run in Gabe's room to get him. But Toy, as a man, the protector, he grabbed me and he took me into our closet, which was located in the master bathroom of our bedroom at that time. And we were heading for our firearms. And in the closet, he had a little hesitation, but me, I'm like, no, go for it. I later learned that he heard clear and, no one's there. And I did not hear that. I didn't hear it. I was just trying to get the firearms so that I could protect my son. And all of a sudden the door flew open and Toy was pulled out the closet. And when that happened, I fell in a corner of our closet. And they threw Toy on the floor. And at that time, there was a man in front of me with a shotgun in my face, or whatever kind of gun they use, and it had bright lights and looked like they had on camouflage BDUs. And in my mind, I'm like, no, this isn't the police, because we didn't do anything. We're just regular, ordinary people, go to work every day. At the time, Toy was a truck driver, so he probably got in that morning about 2 o'clock in the morning anyway. And I'm like, no, someone is breaking in our house to kill us. It was so chaotic and so noisy. And when I heard the grenade bombs going off and a batter at our door, I'm thinking to myself, whoever this is coming in, they coming in for a reason. They're coming in to kill us. So I was in disbelief. I was disoriented and confused. Like, why would they be in our house? What did we do? And I could hear my son crying for me. And every time, this chokes me up every time. I could just hear my son crying for me. And I'm begging and pleading, like, can I please go get my son? Can I get my son? And he's telling me to shut up and worry about myself. And I'm like, I just need my son. Can I get my son? I could hear him cry. I felt so powerless. As a mother, it was disheartening to not be able to protect my child. As a mother, your natural instinct is to protect your child, and at that time I couldn't. And at the time I hear them interrogating Toy, and I'm like, what is going on? What is going on? At some point they realized they had the wrong address. And at that time, when they realized they had the wrong address, the guy that was holding a gun to my face put his gun down, told me to get up. It was so embarrassing. Because I only had a T-shirt on, nothing else. I was half dressed. So to have to walk past these guys or women, they had a mask on. It was just embarrassing and vulnerable. And they all run out. You hear them run through the door, hop in their law enforcement vehicles to go to the correct address, and then you just hear it all over again. And in my mind, I say this all the time. I was praying, I hope this family is okay, because when my son was in the room by himself, and I'm just like, oh my God, I hope he know not to make a sudden move, because anything could have triggered we could have made a sudden move. And I'm thinking, I'm so glad that Toy grabbed me and put me to the other room, because just me running across the hallway could have triggered them. And Gabe could have been an orphan. We all could have been dead, and we wouldn't be here today to tell our story. So it was a really frightening night, and we still live with it, you know? Yeah, it was.
Well, and the scary thing is how close it was to being worse than it was. I mean, if y'all had, brought out guns to defend yourself, as I think anyone would in that circumstance, I think that would have escalated it even further, right?
Oh yeah, escalated. We would be dead, because we were literally, when Toy was hesitating, I was like, no, and I was still reaching. And had they not pulled the door open when they did, and I actually got it, we would be dead. We will really be dead. It would be another Breonna Taylor situation, or I think the lady name was Catherine, who the 70-year-old lady in Atlanta that was actually killed. We would be dead. We wouldn't be here to tell our story.
So what was the aftermath like? I mean, it must be a crazy experience to have all of this chaos and then just suddenly quiet. They're not in the house anymore. Like, you're all just sitting there trying to figure out what happened. Like, what went on after all of this?
Oh, the aftermath was devastating. They just give us a business card, and then they go on about their everyday life. They can enjoy their children and live their life as if nothing happened. But with us, that wasn't the case. Physical wounds can heal, but emotionally, mentally, psychologically, physically, we're still healing. Gabe, at the time he was 7, he developed a really bad nervous condition where he would literally unthread his clothes, and I would have to take him to school with extra pair of clothing, because I didn't even know you could unthread clothes like that. He would come home with one leg higher than the other, or no socks on, and I'm just like, what's going on? He would literally just be nervous and unthread his clothes, and he in school he couldn't function anymore. I had to take him out of school and get him homeschooled, and just the financial burden, trying to keep up with household financial obligations was difficult. I had to go on a leave of absence from work so that I can make sure my child was okay. And that became really hard, and it nearly wiped me out. The sleep deprivation, I would spend all night I became hypervigilant, and all night I would just, because Toy was a truck driver and I would be home by myself, I would just perimeter our home inside and constantly looking out the windows, checking the doors, and turning off the alarm, turning it back on, just to make sure I can hear the ding so I know that it works. And although that really didn't help in the situation, because even when they raided our home, our alarm went off. And later on, even the police came and looked at our door and was like, what happened? And when we told him, he kind of chuckled. It was like, even we knew that this was the wrong address. Even they knew, because I think they had to contact them to let them know. And we're still, to this day, trying to heal mentally. I had to stop getting therapy because just the cost, was really a burden, and I couldn't really afford it anymore. So it tore us up. We're still trying to recover.
Did the officers responsible ever apologize for this?
The agent that was in charge that night came back and apologized, gave us a business card, and left.
And that's it?
That's it.
Patrick, how common is this? We have a bunch of cases that, have sort of similar situations. How often does this happen?
So we don't know exactly how often police, whether that's state, federal, or local, are raiding the wrong house. We know that these raids are happening with extreme regularity, and one of the things that's changed in law enforcement over the past 30 or 40 years has been that these raids went from being something that was extremely rare because you'd only use it when there was a hostage situation or something that dangerous, to being used to do normal warrant service stuff. In this case, they were trying to arrest an alleged drug dealer, And obviously there could be a lot of safer ways to do that, but we're not even talking about the safety of the drug dealer here. We're talking about the safety of a completely innocent family and frankly the safety of the officers because, thank goodness the Martin family didn't get a hold of the gun. Who knows what would have happened, but it wouldn't have made anything better. And the danger is inherent every time these raids take place. And so we know they're happening a lot. We don't have specific details, but we know because IJ itself has litigated 3 of these cases that all over the country in the last few months, and we have more coming up. And, once you sort of flip that rock over, you see a lot of interesting things underneath it.
Patrick, could you give a little bit more background about in Trina's case, how far apart were these homes? How unreasonable was this mistake? What did the officer give as his justification for raiding Trina's home?
Yeah, so the home in the neighborhood here, we're dealing with sort of larger upper middle class homes, big yards, garages. These are nice houses. The house they were trying to raid was down the block. It was probably 4 or 5 houses down. It was on a different street with a different name. It had a different house number. There were a number of other features that set it apart. Of course, there are some similarities. These are all houses that are built in a single development. But there were other conspicuous features like where the door was placed, how the garage was facing, whether there was a big tree in front of the house, and all sorts of things like that. I think all those things are relevant. But fundamentally, the problem here and the problem in the other IJ cases that we've brought is that the police don't even bother to check the house number. So, you could imagine a situation where you would say, well, I could see myself making that mistake if you went to 123 Main Street, but actually you went to 123 Oak Street on the one street behind. I still don't think that would be good enough. But that's not even what happened in this case. And here, the excuse that was ultimately given by the FBI agent who's directing a team of people wearing military-grade equipment with assault rifles to kick in the door and explode grenades and arrest people was, I put it in my GPS as one thing, and it took me to the other thing. And we were never able to verify that because this officer also happened to just throw away his GPS very conveniently.
Well, that's, very, very conveniently.
I always throw away my GPS.
Sure.
Exactly.
Every time I use that, I just throw it away.
No, I mean,
I disposable GPS.
Well, it's like
right?
I think most of us have like a box of old electronics in our house that we don't know what to do with. But never thrown away a Garmin, let alone one that was involved in a gigantic screw up like this. But here's the thing about the GPS piece of it is even if that were true, and I think when you hear it, it seems unbelievable from the beginning. If an Uber driver is trying to drop off some Chinese food and it takes him to a house with a different house number, he's going to make sure that he goes to the right house before he drops off the Chinese food. And so you expect the level of due diligence for an FBI agent who's leading an incredibly dangerous house raid to be at least as high as the Uber driver. And that's definitely not the case. And if the Uber driver screws up, you're going to get a refund for your Chinese food. And here, effectively, the Martin family has been fighting for 7 years to get the refund for the horrible mistake that the FBI made.
Did you know IJ represents ordinary people, free of charge, as they fight back against government abuse? If you're looking for a rewarding way to support our work, consider becoming a member of our merry band of monthly donors and stand shoulder to shoulder with IJ's clients every month of the year. Monthly donations are convenient and cost-efficient, meaning more of your money goes directly to our fight for freedom and justice. Sign up to donate today at ij.org/monthly.
What made you decide to sue about this, and how did you even start that process?
Well, I'm a fighter, and it didn't sit right with me. The apology that was given, it wasn't even sincere. It's just like, sorry, here's a business card. And then when you try to call, you don't get anyone. And what made me want to sue is because I knew it was unjust. And at some point, I'm just not fighting for my family. It's beyond my family at this point because you hear about it all the time. It's about the families that had this incident happen to them prior to me, and hopefully it could prevent it happening to any other family after me. I Googled several civil rights attorneys in Atlanta, And I went through so many before one person said yes. They were shocked, and a lot of people said no, we can't take that. And Lisa Lambert, who said yes, she was shocked. She said, "Wait, what?" She said, "Send me what you have, and I'll give you a call back in a couple of days." And I sent her a business card because that's all I had. She gave me a call, and she said, "Okay, I'll take it." And when she said, "Oh," after all the no's that I received, when I finally got that yes, I knew it was right. I knew I had to do it.
Did the other attorneys who said no give a reason? Did they just say, we think something bad happened to you, but we just can't fight this? Or how did they justify it?
Some said, "Oh, you can't sue the FBI. That you can't sue them." And some said that'd be really difficult, and they can't do it. And that's what I ran into a lot. And there was one attorney, that said, "Okay."
And it has been difficult. This has been going on for, since 2017, basically, and winding the way through the courts. And it does kind of seem like the courts are saying you can't sue the FBI. So what's the sort of legal posture of what's happening here?
Yeah, so I mean, the fundamental problem here is that we're dealing with the federal government as the defendant and the lawyers for the defendant. And of course, the courts are part of the federal government too. And through various different means, whether or not it's technically impossible to sue the FBI, it's very difficult, no question. And the government is trying to make it ever more difficult in any given case. And so the posture of this case is that the Martin family brought both constitutional claims under Bivens, which is a doctrine we've talked about quite a bit, and then also under the Federal Tort Claims Act, which our listeners may know from our case on behalf of James King. And ultimately what this case at the U.S. Supreme Court is about the Federal Tort Claims Act. And what's interesting here is that in the last 20 or 30 years, the Supreme Court has made it almost impossible, if not functionally impossible, to sue federal officials who violate the Constitution under this Bivens doctrine. And they've done that on the theory that it's not the business of courts to create causes of action. And so we're not going to imply one, even though the Constitution says you have these rights. What the court has said is that's the job of Congress. And so we don't want to usurp the role of Congress by providing you a cause of action. And what's interesting and unique about this case is that under the Federal Tort Claims Act, Congress did provide that cause of action and specifically did so by amending the FTCA in 1974 because of wronghouse raids just like this one. And so there, Congress said, hey, you can sue us, the government, if our police officers violate your rights by, for instance, raiding the wrong house. This is something called the law enforcement proviso. So it's in black and white. Congress passed the statute. Mm-hmm. It's been there for 50 years. And nevertheless, when the Martin family tries to use that as an avenue for relief here, the courts and the government say, oh, sorry, you can't do that either. Even though Congress did give you the cause of action, we're going to make up several reasons why, several exceptions to the statute that mean that no matter how clearly your rights have been violated here, and no matter how straightforward the language of the statute is, you actually don't get your day in court.
So can we talk about causes of action for a quick second? Because as a non-lawyer, that's one of the weirdest things to me. A cause of action, right, is basically just a way to sue about a thing, right?
Yes.
And so you said earlier, there's all these rights in the Constitution. It seems sort of intuitively obvious that if rights exist, you should just be able to sue to enforce them, right? Like, what's
Justice Marshall would agree.
Yeah, this is Marbury versus Madison. Yeah.
Like, what's the point of them existing if you have to then say, okay, we articulated, these rights and how the government can interact with them, and then also we have to separately articulate the process of how you can sue about that. How did we even end up in a situation like that?
Well, I think the sort of more candid answer is that the courts have created these exceptions at the behest of the government, often to protect the government because the government finds itself in a situation where it doesn't want to be sued. And then everything sort of trickles down from that to these sort of situations. And so you might imagine a case, if you look historically at things like sovereign immunity or the other immunity doctrines, it usually starts with some state saying, I don't want to pay that debt or whatever. And then we end up going through this whole rigmarole where the court kind of twists itself into knots to find some way to get the government out of it. And this is downstream from that. And it doesn't make any sense. As you said, we have these rights. Rights are meaningless. I mean, Justice Scalia would famously say, read the Constitution of the Soviet Union. It's very protective, but the problem is you can't enforce any of it. And so he would call these things parchment promises. And right now we're living in, at least with respect to the federal government, and thanks to things like qualified immunity, state and local governments as well, a regime where we have these rights that we view to be fundamental, and these rights are restrictions on the power of the government to do certain things. And they turn out to be parchment promises because your rights get violated and the courts say, oh, sorry, there's just nothing we can do about it. And it's inconsistent with the way that things worked historically. It's also inconsistent with the fact that you can bring what's called injunctive relief. And so you can tell the government, without any cause of action really, to stop violating your rights or don't violate my rights in the future. But once they've violated your rights, the courts treat that like a completely separate thing on the theory that somehow awarding money damages could be more burdensome to the government than directly telling the government you're not allowed to do this, or you have to tear down that thing, or you have to release that person. And so there's not a lot of logic to it, but that's the regime that we live in now, and it's only getting worse and has been for probably the last 75 years.
At the risk of getting too much into the weeds, because the FTCA is a very, very thorny subject for both of us, since we both worked on James King's case, what was the basis for the circuit court's rejection of Trina's claims here?
So the Federal Tort Claims Act, for everybody listening at home, basically just allows you to sue the federal government for the torts, the harms created by government employees, as if the government were a private employer. And so if you think about it like the pizza delivery guy runs over your mailbox, you can make Domino's pay for the mailbox. These are the sorts of things that the government's thinking about. In fact, in 1946, when it passed the FTCA, a lot of the discussion was about car accidents and things like that. And so that's what we're ultimately talking about. But the FTCA has a bunch of exceptions because of various government reasons. And the two that are at play here are, one is called the discretionary function exception. And that says that anything that's a discretionary function is an exception to this broad grant of acceptance of liability. And the problem is that that is a term of art that Congress understood to mean a very specific and limited thing in 1946. But over time, the government's been able to sort of switch it into the colloquial understanding of discretion, meaning anytime I have the opportunity to decide what to do, I have discretion. And if that were the case, the entirety of the FTCA would be completely illusory. But the thing that really makes this case stand out as egregious is in the 11th Circuit, where this case was ultimately dismissed, that rule couldn't apply because of other circuit precedent. And so what the 11th Circuit did is they said, well, actually, since we can't get into that exception, this is barred by the supremacy clause of the Constitution, which, if people don't know, says that the Constitution and laws of the United States are supreme to the state laws whenever they conflict, assuming that you're actually exercising the powers vested in the federal government. But the point is, the supremacy clause says federal law is supreme. And here, the law that the Martin family is trying to enforce is the Federal Tort Claims Act, which was enacted by the federal Congress. And so it really kind of melts your brain to try to figure out, how is this actually a state law conflicting with the federal law? Because fundamentally, they're saying, well, since this affects the operation of federal executive actions like FBI raids, that is a hindrance to the federal government. And because the FTCA is drawing on state tort principles, there's a supremacy clause problem, and that's just bananas.
So to protect the supremacy of Congress, we're going to ignore what Congress says when they waive sovereign immunity in the FTCA. Is that right?
That's exactly right. We see Congress has told us that they want to allow these lawsuits, but we want to protect Congress from its own decision-making, basically, is what the court said here, which, again, to tie us back to where we started, is exactly the thing that the Supreme Court said we're not supposed to be doing and why we're not going to allow these constitutional claims. And so in Trina's case, that killed their constitutional claims, but somehow it's also killing their statutory claims. And it just can't be that both of those things are true if either of them are.
So leaving all of the complexities of the FTCA and Congress and et cetera aside, Trina, how did you first meet Patrick and find out about IJ? What was that like?
It was my attorney, Lisa Lambert, that, and I really appreciate her too because she didn't give up. Lisa reminded me of myself because she's relentless. When she was really diligent on working with our case, and she was really passionate and genuine about it, and self-aware, really, because when she knew she got to a certain point, she was wanting to pass us on. So I think she heard about IJ and reached out to you guys, and we had an interview with them, and they presented our case to the board. In turn, they agreed to accept our case, but it was really Lisa that did the footwork and that found Patrick. She wanted our case to be heard just as much as we did, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, our colleague Anya Bidwell had done a presentation that Lisa had attended, and so that was how she knew to reach out to IJ. So Lisa reached out to Anya, who I, of course, work with all the time, and that was where we got the ball rolling on the Martin case.
Trina, when you got the call that IJ was going to take your case pro bono and continue trying to push and change the law, what did that feel like?
Because we had been fighting so long, it was just a sense of disbelief, but also a feeling of being overwhelmed with joy and appreciation, and just finally, like we can, be heard. And with this group of brilliant attorneys, I feel so confident, and just there's no words. They say thank us, thank you for allowing us to take your case. No, thank you, because you believed in our case so strongly that you accepted it, and you put all this footwork into it to get it to the point where it is right now. And it was just a mixture of feelings, just happy, but you still have that what if, what if we, don't win, what if this happened, what if, and I think that's come in because we've been fighting so long, and it was easier to give up, but when IJ came along, when Patrick came along, I felt revived, okay, we have a chance. So that's where I am. We have a chance.
Yeah, we keep having dinners and lunches, and we just get into big arguments about who should be thanking the other person. So, I mean, it's a good
it
fight to
together.
have.
Like none of us can do this without
true.
each other.
That's right.
The thing that you mentioned that I think that those of us who aren't kind of parties in these cases don't think about enough is how much it weighs on you every day, even when stuff isn't happening in the case, right? Something will get filed, and then you wait for months and months and months and months for a decision, and just the kind of everyday weight of carrying that around and wondering about all of the different ways that it can unfold. Like, that must be kind of a big burden to carry.
It is a big burden to carry, but at the end of the day, you feel a sense of hope. And I think that's what drives me more, because I feel like everything happened for a reason. It just aligned so properly to me. Everything just lined up, and in my mind, it's a huge sense of hope. And I'm looking forward to this journey. I'm eager to keep driving, whatever it is I have to do, however many interviews I have to do, I'm going to do it, whatever it takes. And I see the light at the end of the tunnel.
So, Patrick, talk about that light at the end of the tunnel a little bit. Like, what happens, when we win at the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this to Trina, and I've said it to other people. Like, the really difficult thing in any case like this is getting the court to take the case.
Yeah.
Because that's the hardest statistically thing to do, and here we've done it.
And that happened fast, too, in this case, didn't it?
Yeah, so it wasn't so much that the court took it quickly. It was that the timeline for hearing it was quick, because the court decided that it wanted to hear this case this term instead of next term. And so we have been on an expedited schedule a little bit, and so it's been a little more hectic than it normally is, which is already fairly hectic. But at this point, when we win this case, it's really about adding a layer of accountability to all federal policing across the entire United States. And so one of the things that I think gets lost in all of the technical jargon about how the statute works, or is lost in the simplicity of the terrible thing that happened here, which is just the police raided the wrong house, is the fundamental thing that we're arguing about in the Supreme Court, and that the court will hopefully be deciding, is What happens when federal law enforcement or investigative officers violate your rights? Can you hold them accountable? And we say yes, and the government says no. And the answer that the Supreme Court will provide will have an impact across the entire United States for the 100,000+ federal police officers across all these different agencies. I mean, we think about it as just the FBI, but you have to imagine things like the ATF or even prison guards or U.S. Park Police. Every federal agency has some sort of detachment of police officers who have guns, who can do things, and the way that those folks may be able to be held accountable, and more importantly, will have the victims of abuses be given relief from the government, who puts the people out there on the streets, is going to be determined by the decision in this case. And so it really is a much more consequential case than I think a lot of people have recognized up to this point.
Patrick, this won't be your first time arguing at the U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, it won't even be your first time arguing about the FTCA at the U.S. Supreme Court. You mentioned earlier Brownback versus King. That was unfortunately a remote argument during COVID. I remember it happened here in a conference room down the hall. Could you give a little bit of insight into both the kind of prep that goes into one of these arguments, and then also, maybe what you're most looking forward to this time around now that it's going to be in person?
Yeah, so let me first say that I think I looked at this, and I think I'm going to be arguing the last two FTCA cases before the Supreme Court, which is something I never set out to do. I know it's like young lawyers are not like someday I would really like to dig deep into the Federal Tort Claims Act and all of its minutia. Excuse me. So yeah, the process for preparing is grueling. I mean, we spent all this time and as I said, we're on this expedited schedule, and so you have to put together the briefing, you have to dig out the arguments, what these issues are about. Are things that the Supreme Court itself hasn't really been able to pin down in 80 years. So however many justices have come and gone on the court in that time, they couldn't figure this out. And they say, hey, you tell us what the answer is, and you do it in the next month or so. And we have to write the brief. And then once we submit the brief, we have to start preparing for oral argument and getting ready to answer any conceivable question that might be lobbed at us. We're waiting for the government to file its brief that will then dictate how we continue preparing. We do a bunch of moot courts, both internally at IJ with other attorneys here and externally at universities or with experts or with other Supreme Court litigators to make sure that every answer we give in the 30 minutes we have in the highest court in the country is as honed as it can be to give the most concise and understandable answer. And it's definitely there will be more pomp and circumstance with the ability to actually go inside the courthouse and not have to do it over a desk phone. But I'm excited. I was excited to sit next to Anya as she argued Gonzalez versus Trevino. And so now I'm finally getting my chance to go into the courthouse. When Brownback went up, I think it was one of those moments in my life where I thought I never imagined this would be possible, that I would ever get to go before the U.S. Supreme Court. And so now to be doing it for the second time and actually going inside with all the fancy marble and columns, it feels kind of surreal, but it's amazing. It's incredible. And we couldn't do it without people like Trina and Toy and Gabe and the wonderful support that we get from all of our donors.
So just to wrap up, Trina, what advice would you give to someone else who's part of a civil rights lawsuit?
The biggest advice I can give to someone is to know your rights, and fight for your rights. Don't fold. Don't allow anyone to sweep your situation underneath the rug. Fight for justice, because at the end of the day, you can help other people, and that's in your situation, have been in your situation before, and just prevent future incidents from occurring. So my biggest advice is know your rights and fight. Don't fold.
Well, I have one final question. Your case has taken such a circuitous path to get here. I'm sure when you filed it, you had no expectation that you would one day be walking into the U.S. Supreme Court to have your case heard. What's surprised you most about this journey?
It seemed like for so long it was suppressed. Mm-hmm. Like it was really quiet, really silent. We had our cases a few years ago, and I heard a few years ago, and it was really quiet. So all of a sudden, it's just like here we are.
Someone's turned on the lights.
Right,
yeah, everyone's watching.
We're here, and so it's been really overwhelming. And Emotionally and mentally, I have to remain strong because I'm reliving everything again now. I'm having interviews. I'm talking about it. I get choked up. Every time I have to talk about my son and how I felt so powerless, it's emotionally exhausting. But I'm not going to let that stop me because I'm where I am for a reason. And I'm not going to let anyone down. So I'm just really happy and thankful to be in this situation. So I'm here for the journey, for the long haul. So, yeah.
And Trina's strength to fight this battle and never give up is going to result in the world being a better place for tens of thousands of Americans. And so that's the thing that people should keep in mind, because it does seem like an impossible task to continue fighting this fight for years and years and years. But if you don't do it, you never get this chance to make the world a better place, not just for yourself, but for thousands and thousands of other people across a country of 300 million. And so it's really an incredible thing that you've done. And we're so happy to be doing it with you.
I'm so happy for you to be doing it for me.
Thank you so much, Trina,
Thank you.
for fighting and for coming in and talking with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and tune in for more videos.